Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Anatomy of Film podcast. My name is Lil Souffle. I'm joined here by Bill Griff
Hello. Nice to be here, as always.
and Eugene.
Hello, we're back.
So, what have you guys been up to? It's been a while since I've done one of these. I did rewatch La Dolce Vita and absolutely loved it even more.
I'm glad.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal film, but I
You
need to
like
see.
it more than Star Wars The Force Awakens?
I know it's a travesty to say, but I think I do. Yes.
Wow. I know that was your most recent watch. Is that film?
I hated it. I
You
hated it so
hated it.
much.
You hated it?
It was so egregious.
Egregious. Is it? Would you call it scrungly even?
Don't use those words with me.
Yeah.
I would never use Grungly.
you just did.
But
Checkmate.
I mean, it was like a thing to watch with friends. Always get to choose what the community watch. But
Of course, but this time you did get to choose.
it
Even
wasn't
though
my
you're
choice. It
a huge
wasn't my
Star Wars
choice.
fan.
It was not my choice. It was not my choice. I mean, I
You're
thought
like,
it was.
You're
wasn't
like, guys, we need to watch Adam Driver's best performance.
but I expected to enjoy it. sorry. Don't worry about it. Yeah, I did not enjoy it at all. I thought I would be like a popcorn, like turn your brain off, Star Wars nerd thing but no, it did not work for me. It was very, very Disney coded. Like, there was not a single real character in it. There was no emotion.
That's interesting. You talk about a film you've seen that features characters showing no emotion because that's my most recent watch. Is see how I segued like that? Bertrand Bonello's La Bête or The Beast, a recent release. I just watched it on the Criterion channel because it just premiered there, and honestly, pretty fucking great. Pretty great film. I don't really understand what it's about fully because I'm just recently watched it. I didn't really dive into any it.
The Beast was fantastic. It really sold me on Bonello as a director because House of Tolerance has been one of my favorite movies forever. But his filmography never really like stuck out to me. Like none of it I was really familiar with. But like The Beast solidified as like I should delve into this man's filmography because like these two movies were so fantastic. He probably has more gems.
Yeah, I really want to check out Nocturama.
Me too. That one
Except
was so good.
I heard that it's a remake of Bresson's The Devil Probably, and if anyone knows me, they know that I think The Devil Probably is the Diarrhea Probably. I think that's one of the worst films ever made.
Did you have
That's
any
getting
thoughts on
cut. I don't care.
But anyways, I digress. Eugene, anything you've seen recently?
I mean, recently, I haven't been watching so many movies, but I rewatched Apocalypse Now for the first time in a while. I watched the final cut,
The best cut.
and let's just say that we'll get to it when we get to it on the list, because I have things to say about that movie that aren't necessarily
We talked about it a
popular.
little bit.
Yeah.
Foreboding. Very foreboding to leave us with that.
That's gonna be a great conversation.
Yeah. Tune back
years
in
from
2
now.
years and a half.
Yeah, literally just years from now.
2.5 years from now.
I'd say one.
We'll see.
But yeah, Force Awakens wasn't going to be my choice of most recently watched. I recently rewatched Trainspotting for the first time since like early college, late high school, and I really enjoyed it. But I don't want to say the words like it's growing out of, but like I've kind of like it's one of those movies that hits. There's certain movies like that like that hit you more when you're younger, and that like I wouldn't say that you grew out of them, but like they don't affect you as much anymore, and like they're not like inspirational or like, but it's still fun. It's still great fun. Probably my favorite Ewan McGregor's performance, and like that movie has a lot of energy to it, and it's really great. not buying that Criterion 4K anytime soon though, until they
It
correct.
looks incredible, honestly. I've seen images of it, held it in person. It just feels perfect. It feels like how every Blu-ray case should be, you
These
know?
are wow.
It glows in the dark.
It
What more do
glows
you
in the
want?
dark. It
Does it
dances
still
in the
glow in the
dark
dark?
too.
I thought that was a
Yeah.
limited edition thing. It still
No,
glows in the dark.
it glows in the dark, it blows in the dark, it even dances in the dark. It's incredible. It does look like a birthday card though that you'd open up and it starts singing like Bad to the Bone or something.
Hmm. Yeah. What drove me to rewatch is because like owned that Train Spotting vinyl for so long, and randomly while I was doing chores, I was using my vinyl player and like playing some vinyls, and like I just put the Train Spotting one on, and it's such an interesting music selection. I was like, I kind of want to delve back into this one.
Did have a great soundtrack from what I remember. There's one
Yeah.
song from it that I really, really enjoyed that I even included on a playlist that I think I still have. I think it's called Born Slippy. It's the name of the song.
How's it go?
Uh, he says boy all the time. Look at you. I don't even know. It's been so long.
I want to say it rings a bell.
Rings a bell. I don't. It doesn't even ring a bell to me anymore. I'll send it to you after we're done recording. Then it'll
Okay.
all make sense.
It's not gonna be in the Train Spotting soundtrack.
It is. It literally is. The song even says "Born Slippy" from Train Spotting. But
Okay.
yeah, I think it was played in the club, like when everyone was having sex in that one sequence.
Oh. That's a great
Yeah,
song.
yeah.
If it is the yeah.
But we're gonna be discussing the Gleaners and I, which is Eugene's rec. He's actually won twice in a row, and believe it or not, this is for many of us one of our first films from Agnès Varda, the director.
I am I'm a big Agnès Varda fan. I Cleo from 5 to 7 is my favorite movie of all time. To me, like Varda is one of those like cinematic figures who have managed to plant themselves so well in the pantheon of like the greatest of all time. And with Varda specifically, not only as a filmmaker but also just as an artist in general. I think Martin Scorsese said once, like she is art. It's very simple, but it's like so complete.
Yeah, I mean, because this is my first time watching a Varda film. Of course, I have admire from afar. Like I've loved interviews I've seen with Varda and like just featurettes of her with interacting with other filmmakers and stuff. And but like I've never watched a Varda film. It's always been like a huge blind spot for whatever reason. Be so many days I'd be like, today is the day I watched Cleo from 5 to 7, and that day wasn't the day I watched Cleo from 5 to 7. But like, so I was like really interested to see that this was the pick, because like I was like, okay, I'm down, and I thought it was the perfect introduction to Varda, because like you can tell like filmmaking is her like she's really great at like not just like making art but like connecting to the audience. Like she's like such the grandmother of like cinema vibes, you know?
Yeah,
Like
it's
it's so tender and it's so personal, and yeah, I love Varda. I really want to watch more stuff from her.
yeah, I love her too. And like you said, I think it's a great introduction to her because it introduces her as a person, not just her work. I think it's important to, well, I think it's good to get into her filmography while knowing a little bit more about her and who she was. I think it's a very good first Varda movie. And yet to talk maybe a little bit more about Varda, she was actually born in Belgium, in Brussels. I mean, she is French, but because her mom is French. So her mom was French, her dad was a Greek refugee. She was born in 1928, which makes her about 71, 72 for the filming for the filming of The Gleaners and I. And yeah, well, she passed away a few years ago, like 5 years ago in 2019. And I don't know, Varda also has so much influence. People would often debate what the first film of the French New Wave or the Nouvelle Vague was. And like some people might say was Chabrol's La Beau Serge from 1958, but like some others might say something like it was Breathless, Abu Souf by Godard from 1960. But I think in contention there's also Varda's debut film La Pointe Courte from 1955, and like people argue on whether or not La Pointe Courte is formally a part of the French New Wave because of when it came out and what it meant. Like the question is, had the French New Wave started by that point, or like did it start with that movie, or did it start after it? But regardless of it, it still paved the way for the movement drastically to in a level that no other film had before it, which earned her the nickname of the grandmother of the French New Wave. She would go on to become the only major female director, well, the only female director associated with the French New Wave.
I mean, the French. I don't like singling out like specific movie or directors, more of a collective, but like definitely she definitely paved the way along many others like Melville and stuff like that to like get the French New Wave up and rocking. If like one would consider like a what was the Truffaut movie you said? Because I always thought that 400 Blows was kind of like my like standard of like how the French New
Mhm.
Wave started. 400 Blows, Breathless. That's kind of like what brought French New Wave to like I don't want to say like more like mainstream like cinema audience. Not really mainstream, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, La Pointe Courte actually didn't have a commercial release until 2008.
That's insane.
Yeah, so that's another reason why people don't really consider it the first one. But even though it was 3 years before La Beau Serge, which is like kinda what's mostly the consensus on. But it's also, well, yeah, it's more so a debate between La Pointe Courte and Le Beau Serge by Charles. And another interesting tidbit about that movie is that when she made La Pointe Courte, she was only like a photographer. And she said she had only seen like 10 or 20 films in her life before then. And this, I think, like molded Varda's voice and made her into this pioneer. She came into the scene so fresh. Well, she was a part in revolutionizing cinema. And then, well, 45 years later at 72, after a few years away from the spotlight, she would return with the same attitude to give the documentary filmmaking a brand new turn with the Gleaners and I.
So curious about this because I'm so unfamiliar with like Varda's film. Not unfamiliar with her filmography, but like her trajectory as a filmmaker.
I mean, we talked a little bit about Varda. Do you guys want to jump into the film, or do you guys have anything to say about Varda or like your experiences with her?
Well, I mean, you guys covered it for the most part. I really love Varda as a filmmaker and as a voice. This is definitely not my first of hers, but every time I watch a new Varda film like The Gleaners and I, I'm constantly reminded of her personality and just how enriching she is. Particularly Jane B. par Agnes V is a documentary that I really love that showcases her as a person and just how, I don't know, bubbly she was and how kind you could feel. Um, you could feel her kindness seep through the screen and in her voice and her mannerisms and the way she'd pay attention to details. I just, I really appreciate her as a filmmaker. Same can be said for her uh, fictional work like Vagabond and Le Bonheur, and of course Cleo from 5 to 7, which I am honored to have been able to watch that with Eugene for a first time watch, considering that's his favorite film of all time.
It was
Yeah,
fun, yeah.
I really love her as a filmmaker, and I'm really glad that we're going to be able to talk about her because The Gleaners and I is it's a really special film, I think, in terms of the history of documentaries because when I was watching this, I couldn't help but feel like I've seen this kind of style done before, at least with like contemporary documentaries or even YouTube vloggers of today.
Yes.
Like the Casey Neistats of today. This
Jesus.
movie literally though, it feels
No, I agree.
it feels
That's
pretty revelatory. she's able to put herself and her personality into the work, so it's not just about the work itself, it's about how she feels about it, and you really get to tap into her soul often. So yeah, I'm very happy we're going to be able to discuss her. Definitely love
Yeah,
Varda. I think she's really important for filmmaking history.
Yeah, when it comes to
yeah,
documentaries, people always tend to look at them, and some people try to always make them like very objective. But like you, like as someone who like adores documentaries, like if you point a camera at something, it no longer becomes objective because you're choosing to show something. And like what I love about Varda is that like this is all her. Like she's the one talking, she's the one filming, and like so it's like just such a beautifully like subjective piece, and just her inserting herself and not just her opinions but like her jokes, her love, her wisdom throughout, like with her subjects and with like the topics of the film, and the fact that and like how that relates to her life too is great.
yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited to dig into it, to go into it deeper. So, of course, the movie starts with the camera scrolling through a dictionary looking for the definition of the words glean and gleaner. The definition it shows for the word glean is to gather after the harvest. Then we see Millet's famous paintings, The Gleaners, and we get a general introduction of the concept through interviews and montages. And after the introduction to the Gleaners, we get introduced to La Gleaneuse, or the female gleaner, a famous painting by Breton, which is explicitly compared to Varda, who refers to herself as a gleaner, but instead of picking wheat and produce, she picks up her camera. Yeah, like just a little tidbit is that the original French title of the film is not The Gleaners and I, or Les Glanures et moi, like it would be in French, but Les Glanures et la Glaneuse, which roughly translates to The Gleaners and the Female Gleaner. I think it's important to mention this because in the English translation, the title implies that Varda and the Gleaners are completely different entities. It's the Gleaners and then there's me. But like in French, it establishes Varda as one of the Gleaners. She is one of them. She's a different sort of Gleaner, and her individuality is still present in the title, but she's also a part of this community, and it has a greater sense of togetherness. An emphasis on the qualities she shares with her peers that gets completely lost in the English translation.
Because filmmaking in a way is a bit of, especially documentary filmmaking, in a way it's like a form of gleaning, like just
Yeah.
picking up like different quote unquote like scraps of like footage and like a narrative or something, or how these, or how like A connects to B and how it connects to yourself in a way.
It's, yeah, like her gleaning process, as she calls it. There's still this concept of the soul gleaner, but in Varda's sense, in like the painting, it represents this like woman who is alone. She's gleaning, and she looks very like strong, and capable. And like the concept of a soul gleaner is still here, but in Varda's sense, it's like and by that I mean like the gleaner of images and people, moments, and film is in here like made possible uh by digital filmmaking, because you don't need these dozens of crew members and people, and like you can do it all on your own, and that way the interviews feel more intimate and sincere. And yeah, it's not just like an overall glimpse at like Varda's unique filmmaking style. Like she called it cine écriture or cine writing, like it's a portmanteau where she uses her camera like an artisan would. She's like crafting or sewing or whatever her stories in ways where like every scene depends on the others, but all the individual pieces also have independent value by themselves. And if you were to move them around, or if you were to remove some of them, they would still have their meaning, but the meaning of the entire piece would change.
Yeah, because like the way she like films it, it's like you said, it makes it very personal. Like it also makes you feel like you're there. Like
Hmm.
it doesn't even feel like a kind of like a documentary experience. Almost, it feels like you're just hanging out with these people, and like you yourself are like gleaning, like you're there in the in like feeling for crops or whatever. Because like when the movie started, I was like, I don't really know how I can relate. I've never really picked crops or anything before in my life, or had go to pick up some apples. And just the way it like generalizes the term gleaning, and like, because most of my furniture in my house is from furniture that's been dumped in the street. So it's like I totally relate. Like I built my own. I like built a lot of my house off like what other people have thrown away.
Yeah, it's like that saying, like one man's trash is another man's treasure. And you can really there are so many things that go to waste. You could recycle and reuse all those things to make and still leave they can make so much from it. And that is part of what Varda is trying to say. And she's using and like you said, you feel like you're there with her. And it's because she's making such an emphasis on the subjective aspects of like documentary film. And
Yeah,
that makes us feel so much closer to the material and to what she's like yeah, to her subjects and what she's talking about.
could tell that she approached this documentary with pure curiosity. Like it was a question that she always had in the back of her head and just wanted to explore it. Um, Especially with how the film cold opens with her literally looking up the definition as if she herself is an audience member trying to understand what this means, and she wants to learn. She's coming at this topic with no knowledge of it. And I think that's a really refreshing way to start the documentary, because we as an audience member don't really understand what gleaning is, at least to the extent that we'll be learning. And Varda is just going along the journey with us, learning what this means.
Yeah, and it's a learning experience, but Varda never looks down on you. She's always like extremely respectful of her audience. I don't know, it's a very nice experience. It's a documentary that sometimes gets into heavy themes, but at the same time it's also well, you could watch it as like a matinee.
It's pretty playful, for sure. There's some, there's a lot of moments of levity in the film that feel pretty
Yeah.
playful and kind of expands the sense of joy that people feel while doing this, partaking in this.
Yeah, and another of the like little things I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I wanted to bring up again is the digital filmmaking aspect to it and how that enhances Varda's so-called cinecritique. Like she has this little camera that's more affordable than like a big camera for film. You don't have to pay for film. You don't you don't have to hire a whole film crew. She can just pick up her digital camera, go on her journey. It's a lot more accessible for a lot more people. It like the imagery might not be super extra crisp. I think it's still very memorable and very. I think the cinematography is still very well done, and the well, not very well done. I think it's great. I think it's the framing is amazing. The shot composition and decisions are amazing, especially for a documentary and like a spur of the moment type stuff.
It's definitely a feat to see that she didn't make the film look like it was shot on a potato like Gummo or Inland Empire. Both films also shot digitally. She makes the
Yeah,
digital look very clean.
yeah.
Yeah,
I was almost fooled for a second because at the beginning I was like, "Wait, is this film or is this digital?" And then I was like, "Oh, of course it's digital." But like, it looks so nice.
it does. It looked pretty great.
Maybe the scenery is also very nice and very beautiful, but like, just,
It,
it's done really well.
I think a big part of it is her eye as a photographer. One of the things she does that you can pick up on is she would sometimes try to coordinate the colors. Like if a person's wearing like white and red, like a white and red T-shirt, she'll be interviewing them with like a white and red truck in the background. It like really makes these images look better and cooler, in my opinion. I don't know. It's one of those things that when you have an eye for it, you have an eye for it. Varda then starts her journey. Her first stop is in Bus. There, she visits potato fields and explores, along some of her subjects, some of the reasons why potatoes are left behind after the harvesting. Interviews some of the potato gleaners, and she collects potatoes herself.
She's literally taking the definition and the paintings of the Gleaners with her first stop, showcasing the farmers, the farming community in France, and the people that show up to pick up the leftovers, the vegetables that are often thrown away because they don't meet the quality standards for display purposes in grocery stores. So I think it's really interesting, and I think it's a very accessible way to describe what gleaning is by showing real life instances of the paintings we see. Where in the paintings we see the women picking up foods and wheat, and of course with the first scene, the opening scene, we get to see the people that arrive in cars and crates and groups that of people that collect these potatoes that are all misshapen or have blemishes on them that can easily be carved away. And you get to meet the wonderful people that come. There are some really eclectic characters we get to meet throughout this documentary, and I can
Mm-hmm.
just see, especially in this scene, how enthused Varda is with meeting these people and interviewing them and getting to kind of see a window into their lives through gleaning. And I know one of the people we meet are some single mothers that can't afford food from the grocery store, so they're able to glean some, what is it, rejected potatoes from the field. And another group is uh, some people that run soup kitchens or church groups that will give out the food to families who
Mm-hmm.
live in poverty or can't afford to buy potatoes at the store. It's just a really, really beautiful little scene to see, and you could look at all of these scenes that we'll be talking about in the Gleaners. You can look at all of them through their own separate lens and just see how each little detail, each little aspect is shown through the lens of gleaning. I don't know, it's a really cool little opening scene that I enjoy a lot.
Yeah, and I like how Varda herself also gleans. Like she's collecting the heart-shaped potatoes in this scene, and it's like a very cute moment where we get to see more of her personality. And I feel like that wouldn't really be possible if she hadn't approached the documentary in the way she did with her little digital camera. Like she says, she's filming one hand with the other. It's similar to how she's approaching the whole filming of the people who come and pick up the potatoes or glean the potatoes. It's a bit disappointing to see how we have some potatoes that get discarded because they're green or they're damaged, but there are some others that are thrown out just because they were too big for market standards or come misshapen. But they're still perfectly edible and still get thrown out to rot. Even after dozens of gleaners come, there's still mounds worth of good potatoes that get wasted.
Yeah. I mean, before getting into the legality of gleaning, just as a concept, like it's kind of like a good trade. Like even though all this waste is terrible, like the the culture of gleaning that has survived and like kind of morphed into different things throughout the years. That like that those like misshapen, ugly duckling potatoes being there is like still serve a great. Them being left just serves a great purpose because like they're used for soup kitchens, single mothers, and just like people who just love to go and collect. Like it's a beautiful tradition.
Yeah, and we're gonna get to dive deeper into the whole tradition aspect of how some people have been gleaning for decades, or like they have been like everybody gleans in some communities, or people glean because their grandparents taught them how to glean. It's fascinating, and like this return of gleaning, Varda also touches on this aspect, which is like how there's been a rise in gleaning recently, and it's connected to the rise of machinery in the agricultural industry. Like the machines that collect potatoes can't reach too deep into the ground, so the potatoes stay uncollected. And later, like processing machines facilitate the sorting of potatoes that are too big for the market. And at least like in the field shown in Varda's film, this leads to 25 tons of potatoes being thrown out. a lot of which are unsafe to eat, but of course, most of them, or not most of them, but a lot of them are still safe. It's just this culture that somehow made that sort of comeback. And Varda is kind of saying with the rest of the film, like, it's it's always been here and it's a part of life. Like, we're all gleaners in some sort of way.
She early on, she likes to juxtapose a lot of the images of like just like people scavenging for food in the streets too, like trash cans and stuff, using those edits to like say to like juxtapose of like the scavenging for potatoes or what have you. I think it's very cool.
Yeah, and later or on another day, we're not really sure. In the same mound of potatoes that were shown before, she meets a former, we're not giving his name, but like a former truck driver who's fallen on hard times, and she explores his past, how he got into his current situation, and she also is like telling us about his present community. It's one of those scenes that Varda is not only exploring the activity of gleaning, but also like the subjects around it, making it clear that this is a very human story. With these, she's kind of saying like the potatoes aren't the only thing left behind. The people that society leaves behind who are not quote unquote up to the standards set by a world running on capital that depends on pushing people downwards and excluding certain types of potatoes for it to function properly. Yeah, we meet this truck driver. Yeah, like I said, he's not named, but he tells us a little bit about his story, right? He says that, well, he used to be a truck driver. He would drive 20 to 22 hours a day. He had a wife and three kids. I think he says three, maybe it's less, but he says that he had multiple kids. One day, he was driving drunk on the highway and the police caught him. And so he lost his license. He he lost everything. He lost his wife. His wife divorced him. He hasn't seen his children in 2 years at that point. He says that they're 500 miles away and he has to glean to survive. This scene specifically, I think Bill has seen this movie, but I think this scene reminds me a little bit of Vagabond because in the way Varda is portraying um, this community, there's even a bit where she shows the water spout, and she shows a similar water spout in Vagabond, and it's I don't know, it's Varda going to these subjects that attract her attention.
Yeah,
Um,
I love
some
the detail
interesting
that's put
parallels.
into it, like on how he's like, oh, like this is how I get the water, and when it's colder, you have to do this and this.
Yeah, and she cares about these things. She cares about showing these things. It's kind of a letter to the people. Well, to I was gonna say the French people, but people in general, that these people are left behind, and we should do
Yeah,
something about it, or there should be something done about it.
yeah, I think you put it perfectly. That it does match with the gleaning, the things that are left behind.
And well, if we're discussing Varda as a filmmaker here, this scene to me like really cements some of Varda's strengths as a documentarian, because she would often like cut in to give her opinions or share her thoughts or ask questions, but she can also prove that she can stay back, like find a story, follow it, observe it, and not really interrupt it. She doesn't give these people any advice on how to make their lives better. We don't know if she has anything to add or any advice to give. And she doesn't necessarily help them in any major way from what we see in the movie. But she still films them, she doesn't judge them, she listens to them and brings their stories to the forefront. It's a certain type of like activism, and if enough or the right people hear the stories, like things might actually get better in the future. And I think that's one of Varda's intents. She's giving her message through her film as well, through the film itself, like through the I was gonna say the film roll, but I guess through the SD card as much as she is through what is going on in the movie. Yeah, like this all happens in the region of Buzz. Before she leaves, Varda visits Edouard Lubet, a young chef who was raised as a picker, quote unquote, by his grandparents and has continued the tradition. And as she leaves, she describes the experiences of seeing trucks pass by on the highway. This is not the scene where she's capturing the trucks. This is the scene where she's just describing. It's a very calm and relaxing moment. But she's going in her car and she sees the trucks passing by and she says like that she feels like a kid. And it's just those nice moments, in Varda's filmmaking where it's just really fun to see. And they serve as like little interludes between these serious topics.
Yeah, because it's like not only does it just balance out like emotions from like a quote unquote filmmaking sense, but it's also like Varda just being Varda, like just being herself, like having fun with the little things in life, the simple pleasures.
Yeah, and that makes the movie better and her point stronger.
Yeah.
She also, I don't know why, but she seems to have this affinity for idealistic young men because they feature very prominently in her work, both in her docs and in her narrative features. And Edward catched my eye especially because of where Varda decided to put his scene when his scenes when editing the film. This goes
Yeah.
right from a community of people who are struggling economically and are in the margins of society, and it goes to an up and coming young chef who has already been awarded for
Two,
his
yeah,
efforts in
two
the form
Michelin
of
star.
what?
This is the two Michelin star one, right?
Yes, yeah, he gets awarded for his efforts with two Michelin stars. And maybe they're here together because they both take place in the same region of France, which is also like a little bit of a statement, even if it was incidental. But I think they also showcase this spectrum of gleaning. Some people do it out of survival, but others will do it because the quality of the food you find is
Just
sometimes better than the one in the
yeah,
markets that was supposed to be market approved.
yeah, because he says I like to know what I put into my into my food, and like he picks it out himself, and like he cooks it like truly like the most traditional, like the purest form a chef could be, and that's probably why he has two Michelin stars.
Hearing the chef explain while in the restaurant that he encourages everyone that he works with to not waste any amount of food. It's just a really good statement, I think, to spread in the realm of how we treat our foods and what we throw away, what goes to waste, and how, we should be a lot more thoughtful about the food that we're provided with and what we can use to cook with it. And I don't know, it's a really interesting scene to juxtapose who, like you said, struggling versus people that are just, wanting to not produce a lot of waste, not just to garbage, but really to the environment. I feel like this film tackles that aspect of environmentalism really well.
It's the quality aspect too, because I mean, if we go really meta here, like Vardy's making a point of making stuff out of things she gleans, and she considers gleaning to capture things with her images in her documentaries by portraying people who are like in the margins of society and left behind by their government and stuff like that. So she manages to do it with such grace and tell these stories so well that it's not only an important document, but it also becomes highly regarded. Like the guy gets two Michelin stars because his produce is better, because it comes from a better place. And Varda gets awarded with the being in the Sight and Sound list, or like being considered a part of the canon with this film by, yeah, the picking of food, or like the picking of people that get left behind.
Yeah.
These are two very different subjects in the movie, but are the main two characters that we get into, well, not characters, but the two people that we get introduced first after Varda introduced to first.
Hmm. Where she travels to Burgundy and she stops at a museum to see a religious painting by van der Weyden called The Last Judgment. Following that brief moment, she goes on to explore the grape picking culture of the region, first by looking at some vineyard owners who destroy their surplus in order to protect the capital, and later by meeting with Jean Laplanche, a wine grower and psychoanalyst who and yeah, I found that so fascinating that those were his two professions.
No, yeah, wine grower and psychoanalyst.
Yeah, it's like spinning
Yeah,
the wheel.
and his wife. We also meet his wife briefly, and she had met Lacan, or Lacan, yeah, it's Lacan, the famous French psychoanalyst. Like she had been diagnosed for something by Lacan years ago.
Yeah, and he's talking about how like gleaning was banned in the region a few years back. And that sequence ends with a transition of him and his partner talking about his professions and how he manages them, and it's a guide into a scene of a couple telling the story how they met.
Yeah, like this Burgundy section, there's a lot of different things going on. Of course, there's a couple who are telling the story of how they met. There's Jean Laplanche and his wife. There's the painting from Van der Weyden at the beginning, and then there's, of course, the vineyards. I think that it's so curious to see like the huge variety, and the people who destroy the grapes are really, like Varda would put it, like not nice.
Yeah, because
the
like rather than having them glean, they destroy it. Did they say specifically why they don't allow gleaning in that area?
Yes, they say so. They waste like these huge quantities of food, and so like they get rewarded by the markets. Because one of the interviewers says that if they did not do so, they wouldn't be able to control the amount of gleaners that come in. And they start talking about the quality of the second wave of harvesting, the second harvest, and how it's not the same quality. But like they even protect that because if they say they gleaned it from this place, then they would get a. I think the way I interpreted it was that they would get a worse reputation if they were to glean from those areas in the second harvest. Of course, it's a flimsy excuse. It's like, and it's a shame. And of course, there's the irony of her going to see the Last Judgment with all these people going to like hell and screaming as soon as she enters Burgundy, where she finds the most outwardly ungenerous people that she meets in her journey.
Yeah, and just like wine itself is just like such a religious motif too.
But yeah, it's such a shame to see all the because the shots of the grapes all on the ground dried up. It just looks so disgusting. And Varda says it's a shame for it's a waste for everyone. Yeah, they say that it was banned. Jean Laplanche talks about how they banned gleaning on Burgundy 4 or 5 years before the movie was made.
I mean, I can definitely see it as like the because like as globalization goes into more in effect, like just the wanting to control those markets, it's fucked up, but like yeah, it's definitely a pattern that would continue.
Something I want to bring up before we move on, because the Jean Laplanche is a very interesting character to me. In the sequel documentary that Varda made, The Gleaners and I, 2 years later, which isn't something that we considered fully essential when tackling this for the podcast, since that isn't included in the Sight and Sound. However, I wanted to watch it just to see if she added on any of the other characters. And in fact, she did revisit a lot of the people she interviewed 2 years later, one of them being Laplanche. And he says something that's really, I found really fascinating. He compared his job of being a therapist or a psychoanalyst to gleaning. This is something he said that I kind of scribbled down. I don't have the exact quote, but a man sits in their chair listening to what another says while they're laying on a couch. The speech that falls from their mouths can be gleaned and picked up by the therapist, learning more about the world itself from that. While most people who seek out a therapist, they're coming to this relationship feeling like they have no knowledge, but I think it's interesting because he's saying, in fact, it's the opposite, where the therapist or the psychoanalyst has no knowledge of this new patient that they'll be experiencing. So these words that the patient is willing to give to them is something that they themselves are gleaning in, so that they can better understand the world itself, better understand their patient, build a better relationship, so that both parties can leave this relationship that they're building with a better understanding of the world. And the way he described it in the documentary was so cool, fascinating, and it just opened my eyes to see that literally gleaning can be attributed to anything, even working as a therapist, and that you're just gleaning tea and knowledge. from your patients so that you can become a better person. I just thought that was really cool. And it's just super cool that Varda was able to come back to him and they were able to talk about that. Something that wasn't explored in the documentary because Laplanche is such a kooky, interesting character, being a wine grower and a therapist. That sounds like a match made in heaven for two careers to have. But yeah, that's an aspect I just wanted to bring up real quick.
No, that's great. I love that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I didn't watch the second one, but I can definitely see how you could take just any profession and say that this is a sort of gleaning. But yeah, thank you for that little
Yeah.
tidbit.
And speaking of the definition of gleaning, this next sequence is something I actually really liked. Is when Varda is interviewing this couple that are sitting at a bar. Eventually, originally they're talking about their son and his form of gleaning, and that gleaning is different from picking. They make that sort of distinction between the two, which at this point in the documentary, I'm imagining picking was involved with gleaning, but no, gleaning is considered picking something from the earth or picking up something from the earth that grows out of the earth, while picking itself is something that hangs from a plant or a tree. And hearing about that distinction was kind of, I don't know, fun to hear about. And Varda says that, oh, well, she's picking all the time. And it cuts to a little clip of her picking figs and eating from fig trees. Just super cute moment from Varda and her POV. And then it also talks about these farmers or owners that either support the picking or gleaning or do not. And we discussed it earlier with the wine, the grape growers at the vineyards and how they would just pick out all the ones that they wouldn't be using so that they would rot away on the ground. And some people were also doing that with their own harvest of foods. And that sequence is really cool, and it also brings up the next section about the judicial member who shows up at a cabbage field and discusses the penal code of gleaning, which was actually written in 1554 and is still in effect today, which I think is so funny. Um, the penal code is R2610, and it is gleaning is allowed from sunup till sundown. Gleaning may take place after the regular harvest. That's when it's accepted, after the regular harvest, which totally makes sense and it's perfectly plausible to make gleaning, fair, especially for the farmers that grow their foods.
The sunrise to sundown, it makes it safer for everyone, for like the farmers to not have people there at night and for the gleaners themselves. And yeah, I always thought it was funny because I watched the film twice, and the first time I watched it, I thought this guy was a priest. Because when he,
He's holding that book with
yes,
so much passion, it looked like a
Yeah.
Bible. Yeah.
he has his robe, and then he has the penal code, and he says, "This is my Bible." He says it's a penal code, and it says
Yeah.
law, but he says this is my Bible, and I took it literally. Um, but
It's
he
just the
he's
Bible.
taking it he's taking it quite literally. Yeah.
yeah, he says that I think he says that there are new laws about gleaning, but when he started going through the books, that they're the same as they were 500 years ago, which is just so fascinating, especially for these countries that have existed for a long time. How things, I don't know, it's just a proof of how things like just repeat themselves over and over, but they just evolve and are a bit different, but they're still kind of similar. There's a similar scene with a different council or magistrate later in the film. I mean, no, I think it's fascinating, that little tidbit with the law.
Yeah, because like the government has changed. Like it's no longer feudal government, and so many different like powers have ruled France since then. Like just
There have been, it's yeah, France as of right now, it's in the Fifth French Republic. France has gone under so many different rulers and leaderships and forms of leadership and forms of government just in the past 150 years.
yeah.
So, well, not 150, sorry, 250 years. And so, like, just to see that these rules that were introduced in the 1500s are still somewhat, maybe they're not still legal, but they set the basis for the current laws.
Still applicable, and like they still
Yeah,
relatively make sense, even though like the context for gleaning has changed since then, kind of. Besides its
yeah,
original intention, obviously.
yeah. And on the other hand, the other scene that Bill was talking about, the one with the woman from the last scene and the her son who also gleans, that I really like that scene because it gives it this sense of community, and it's one of, and they talk about the differences between picking and gleaning, and you have these things in like countries where so many different regions have each have their own interpretations and each have their own linguistic gimmicks, and I just love learning about those. I think it's so cool that there's a distinction between picking and gleaning here. Maybe in some places there isn't. Varda's documentary says to glean is to gather after the harvest, but it's, I don't know. I just think it's super interesting to learn about these people. I wish I could have. There would have been more scenes with them.
How would you define gleaning in your eyes?
That's an interesting question. I like the definition Varda gives from the. I mean, the idea of gleaning as a concept is kind of newer to me, or at least the word gleaning in English is kind of newer to me. So a lot of my opinions from are influenced by this documentary. But I think the word I really like Varda's definition of gathering after the harvest. I think you could make it broader to have like these metaphorical harvests, maybe to gather what has been left behind, maybe something like that.
Yeah, that's how I would see it. Cause like to me, there's like definitely a lot of different scenarios to put gleaning into. Like I said, like collecting like furniture from the streets and stuff like that.
And then the figs thing, I think it's just really. I think it's funny how she says she's gonna get tipsy. I don't know what she says in French, but she takes one. She says like, "Oh, that was pure alcohol. I'm gonna get tipsy now."
Yeah,
Um, and of course, well, she picks the figs and she really likes it, but then she says she can't say anything to the owner because they don't allow gleaning in there. And even though all the remaining figs are ripe for eating, they aren't fit for candied fruit, so they're discarded as well. And this like furthers Varda's point she establishes on the first half of the film, or in like the first 30 or so minutes, where like there are so many good things left behind, and the culture around gleaning is one of those good things that had been abandoned. And then, well, with the priest, well, not the priest, with the counselor, she discusses the history of gleaning and the laws surrounding it. And this makes me think of how like Varda's framing and her color palette are very reminiscent of like those 19th century gleaning paintings that she loves and she puts all over the film. Like this the Gleaner's struggle is recognized by Varda, but she also has this nostalgia for a time where supermarket chains and profit hungry corporations did not get a vote in deciding who gets to eat and who would be fed and who wouldn't.
hmm.
With this whole thing about the candied fruit, it's like, okay, this is not fit for us. We don't sell this here, so it goes to waste.
Yeah, I also better bring that up because like because like one thing's painting and another thing's shooting on like digital camera, but she does make it like these very picturesque like it definitely is like a flowing version of that painting, this movie, in a way, bringing it to life and bringing it what it means.
Yeah, and modernizing it.
I love how she is kind of welcoming the art of digital filmmaking. She's blurring the line for what's considered art by making this documentary on a digital camera, just showing how you can produce cinema in any sort of through any sort of lens. Yeah,
Very dogma.
very dogma.
And yeah, that scene ends with Varda filming some vegetation and like zooming in on them, and then she expands on her role as La Gleneuse and how she gleans images, impressions, and emotions. We see her house, and we get to examine her living space. She has a lot of paintings, and she has her cats, and we get to see her possessions that she's gathered over the years.
Yeah, that was really cute getting to see her Japan haul and
Yes,
all of the items that she'd collected from there.
yeah, like her gleaning of souvenirs. Yeah,
Yeah.
where she yeah, it's like she's taking a bunch of little images and paintings. Then after that, like I love her. She examines her own hand. I feel like this is something we all do, you know. Like we just grab a camera, whatever, like maybe even a phone camera or something, and you just zoom in as much as possible in one of your body parts, and it makes us feel like foreign animals. You know, it makes us feel like strange creatures. And Varda says that this is the point of the film. She says that this is the point, filming one hand with the other, understanding oneself by observing how other people interact with their surroundings, and then introduce yourself into that world. It's like such a complex idea that is presented in this super childish action, not childish, but super not common action, which is why I love Varda so much in her style.
I love digital cameras, man. Just shoot and shoot.
Mr. 70 millimeter.
Eh,
I think this is when she takes out all her potatoes, her heart shaped potatoes, and she says she likes filming broad. And I don't know, she I think here Varda's showing how like she's a lot more proactive in her documenting as opposed to the more passive documentaries that you would find in the History Channel and whatnot. Like those types of documentaries would do the research in their own time and then they just present you with conclusions. But Varda here is interested in the research process, you know, as much as she's in the researches themselves. I could see an argument where people say that the movie is kind of like meandering or that it drives the focus away from the main subject, but I think that's like I would disagree. I think it's all linked in such a way that it expands what the like that these Vardy moments expand what the film is initially trying to say, and they take it into a more personal and human realm. It's not just data we're talking about here; it's life. And moreover, the film is about La Gleanus, or I in English, as much as it is about the Gleaners, the other Gleaners. And seeing Varda going through all these locations really makes the ethos of the film stronger. You really do believe that Varda is a credible source to like look on for this subject, even if we're not that familiar with the concept of gleaning. She's not necessarily making a documentary about the history of gleaning, but it's more about she's like an expert on what she's talking about. Even if she's not talking about gleaning only, maybe she may not be an expert of gleaning, but whatever she's talking about, I feel like she's still a figure of authority. I don't know. I think it's fascinating.
Someone interviewed her towards the end of the Gleaners and I too, and they said that one of their favorite aspects of the film was when she zoomed in on her hand and how it was reminiscent of the way she zoomed in on Jacques Demy's hand in a documentary that she made about him when he was dying from complications from HIV and AIDS.
Yeah.
And it made
The
her that sequence made her cry and tear up, and she didn't even think about the comparison between the two shots, but in reflection she realized that there is some sort of um, similarity between the two styles. So I thought that was really beautiful and touching in that
yeah,
documentary to bring up some Jacques Demy.
it feels like destiny in a way that the images were so close to each other. I think the documentary you're talking about is called The World of Jacques Demy, but I'm not sure. I haven't seen it, so
No, it's that's let me see. I'll have to look it up, but
I I love to I love it when she entered and like she does nothing about the mold growing.
I
It's like
know.
she loves to keep it there. It looks very like abstract and like just like the letting the leak into the like the water leak continue into the home.
Yeah, it's part of the personality of it, and it's. I mean, it's a sort of gleaning, you know. It's like people
letting
would
nature.
leave a mark like that, like a mold like that behind. They would try to clean it and wash it and get rid of it as soon as possible. But Varda doesn't.
Because it reminds her of like a painting, just letting nature do its
Oh, yeah.
nature do its own art.
She uses those really corny, funny filters on the camera. You remember the ones
Yeah,
that have like the painting frame.
yeah.
The documentary that she mentioned is called Jacques de Nantes, which is it's kind of like a meta documentary slash feature type of film where it explores Jacques Demy's childhood and his upbringing and how he fell in love with cinema while also splicing in Jacques Demy currently in his life, in his later stages in life. It's a short little documentary, but it sounds really interesting. I myself have not seen it, nor have I seen The World of Jacques Demy, but it was interesting getting that little name drop in that sequence.
I haven't seen anything Jock to me, unfortunately.
What the hell?
Really?
Yo,
No way.
I got the box set because you were telling me to watch Young Girls, I think. But yeah, another huge blind spot for me.
Varda plays a nun in Young Girls. She's terrific.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I also love that the cats are like at the very beginning of the film. It's also this whole meta thing because it says a film by Agnès Varda on the TV in our TVs or theaters or VR goggles, whatever you're watching your movies on,
Yeah.
and you got the cat there, and it has the Cinema Tamari or Cine Tamari logo from their old production company. I think it's a nice way to introduce the movie, like such a personal movie. I don't know. I always thought that the house thing feels like a sort of intermission to the film. It's like, okay, Varda is gonna rest a bit. She went to Burgundy, she went to Buzz, she went to visit all these paintings, and now she's back home, and then she has to go out again. And then later there's like, well, and while she's wherever her home is, I don't know where it is at, she does a little sequence where she stops focusing on gleaning food and moves into gleaning's relationship with art. The first person she meets is Herve, or VR99 or VR 2000. Well, he's VR99, but he's gonna change his name to VR 2000 after the year 2000 arrives. And he recycles other people's scrap he finds in the sidewalks to enhance his art and his paintings via sculpture. And this is later juxtaposed by Varda stumbling upon a painting that combines both Millet's The Gleaners and Breton Saglenus. It's a crazy painting. It's like such a cosmic coincidence. I believe Varda when she says it's not a cinematic trick. It's an actual painting she just found. I don't know, but she makes such an effort all through the movie to prove herself as a trustworthy narrator, from the filmmaking to the vulnerable moments. So yeah, like I have no other option but to believe her. But it's so crazy that like she was talking about these two paintings and now she finds a painting that's both combined.
I thought that was kind of a fun coincidence that she picks up that painting while thrifting. And during this sequence, it kind of does showcase the whole aspect of thrifting and going to secondhand stores, going to places and picking up little trinkets and things that we view as art, and her showcasing a multitude of artists that glean off of things they find in the streets. Another guy is Louis Pan, who is a kind of like a hoarding sculpturist. He makes like sculptures out of a multitude of items, like a whole board filled with spoons that are painted against a wall. What are some other things he did? Like tools was another one, and bowls and cups, gear, mechanisms,
Railing, I think he used to like railing or like
railings. Oh
bars.
yeah, cages. There was one he did
Yes,
of
cages.
cages that looked like a cityscape almost. It was really beautiful. I love that piece a lot. The way that she transitions from food to art, it's still something that we digest as a society and still deem as important.
Yeah, we also see the retired bricklayer who makes these totems, like these huge
Oh
totem
my
towers out of
god.
garbage.
Yeah,
And
that was awesome. It almost looked like a little cemetery he has with like a gate to wall off people from coming in.
yeah,
You
and
can't even
it's
tell it's made out of garbage.
but and I think what Varda is doing here, I think she's asking the question. Well, not asking the question, but she's asking us to think about what counts as art. Can something be like junk and be beautiful at once? And I think it can, of course. I think it's, to me, it's like a resounding yes. And you can see the passion these artists have, and how much expression and how much life is communicated through this. It's like I said earlier about Varda's unique cinecriture style, where you're using every word or shot or piece of trash to magnify the overall statement you're proclaiming. And it's like this thing can be beautiful. These things can be beautiful individually, but they can also be beautiful as a whole. The Russian bricklayer's wife though doesn't agree. It's
No.
I'm sorry, we took a little break for technical purposes. And then back on the road, Varda starts heading towards the shore. She She plays at holding trucks passing by with her hands before re-entering the realm of food gleaning. When she arrives, there are dozens of people collecting oysters from the sea. She interviews several of the people there on what the rules on gleaning and collecting the oysters are, but everybody gives her conflicting answers, and she leaves there not knowing really what they told her. And after that, in the same kind of like section or subsection, if you will, she finds this group of people who are singing in Spanish and they're picking up grapes at this abandoned vineyard. This is the scene where she starts dancing with them and stuff, and then she meets a man whom she describes as the only wine grower who actually cares about gleaners, a descendant of Etienne Jules Marie, who is the inventor of chronophotography and therefore one of cinema's ancestors.
That was a crazy coincidence to have happen in the documentary. Almost feels like maybe she looked up the guy prior, but the fact that he is a descendant of that guy is so cool. And getting to see the sequences of the chronophotography, is that it?
Yeah,
Like the
chronophotography.
of like the animals.
Chronophotography. Yeah, of the animals, the dog jumping and the
Yeah.
horse trotting and everything. That's just so cool. And getting to see his little like bunker looking
Yeah, it's
bit
Yeah.
of
bunker-esque with a
his
like little visor.
his little wall of stone that he would set the camera on top of to record it. So
Yeah,
cool.
I also love the little bit of the lore that like the guy says that like it belonged to his family and then he bought the land and then returned it when he married into it.
yeah, I remember that.
That also is the sequence where we see the iconic image of the dog with a boxing glove that's attached to his collar.
Oh yeah, I was thinking that. I was thinking like, who would do that?
I would.
Poor dog. Of course you would.
It's almost like it's preventing him from gleaning. He can't reach down.
Oh,
Yeah,
I wouldn't
and
do that.
yeah. Well, there's a like also a very iconic moment when she starts dancing with the people, and she forgets to turn off her camera. And this is of course like a side effect of digital filmmaking. She's dancing with her camera, and her camera is focusing on her lens. Well, the thing where she stores the lenses, and it's like moving over and over and over. And she says that she caught it dancing, and she wanted to put it on the film. And it's just like
Yeah.
her appreciating the little things in life. It's funny. It's fun. It adds so much personality to her and to the film. It's a very fun moment. I love it.
Also makes for a good transition scene.
It does, yes. And transitioning back to the first moment of this like quote unquote section. It's when she goes to the like the shore and there's a lot of people collecting oysters. Like everybody's confused. Like nobody knows what to glean. Some people say you can glean up to 11 oysters. Some people say you have to glean like 7 pounds or something. And some people say you can glean to the posts, and then some people say you cannot glean past the posts, and some say that up to the posts, or some
Yeah.
say 10 meters back, some say 10 meters further. It's all confusing.
When he was like, I love the moment he was like, yeah, it's 15, and then the guy's like, no, it's 25. It's like, oh, now it's 25.
Yeah, it's such a hard, like, law wise, gleaning is such a hard thing to enforce. They're just making things more complicated. I mean, I guess in this case it feels like it's for safety purposes. Like they don't want people going in too deep to collect the oysters, but it might not be, and it's just a
I mean, the
confusing, like,
oysters are
so
also like
confusing.
a commodity, so
Yeah,
there's also that involved.
I have no idea where this is all happening. Maybe she says it. No, she says that they're going to the beach. Um, I don't know if she says exactly where, well, like which one they're going to. And like, yeah, like you guys said earlier, in this whole region, like, just with the Etienne Jules Marie guy, it's kind of ironic to see the ancestors of analog film in a film that's all about the innovation of digital filmmaking. There's this like irony going on.
I don't know. I really like the Capybara film.
I mean, technically speaking, what she's shooting in is weird form of analog, because it's still like tapes, if I'm not mistaken. She showed the camera. What was it?
I'm not sure. Let me. I don't know what camera she's using. I don't remember what it is.
If I'm not mistaken, she still uses tape, so it's still like some sort of analog. Like that would still need to be
Interesting.
digitized today.
Okay. Yeah, and that guy, the one we're talking about, she describes him as the only wine grower who cares about gleaners. I don't know if we really see that. I think he says that he used to glean in the past, but I don't know if we see any of the politics he's implementing in his own land to promote gleaning or to at least accept it. We're kind of more focused on the filmmaking aspects of it, like the history of film aspects of finding this guy, which are
Wow.
fascinating.
Classic Varda bias towards the filmmaker descendant. If Michael Bay was gleaning, she'd love him.
She would love Michael Bay.
There would be a whole sequence about Michael Bay living in his backyard, and she's like, he would use the leftover gunpowder for VFX explosions to explode all the rotten potatoes, and they'd collect them into like a powdered stew.
All the leftover
This
product placement.
this trivia is so random, but now that we're talking about famous people, I wanted to bring it up at some point. You guys know
Mm-hmm.
that so Varda was good friends with Jim Morrison, both
Interesting.
Varda and the Me. When after he died, she was one of only 6 people at her funeral. Well, the Me was another one, so it was them and then another 4 people. That's so crazy to me. I would have never guessed. Should have mentioned that when I was talking about Apocalypse Now. I realize now. Well,
Well, that's the end. Yeah,
um,
speaking of Morrison, she goes to Paris now, and her interests begin to lie on trash cans. This interest came from a conflict between a group of youngsters, a supermarket manager, and a court magistrate, almost like a miniature Anatomy of a Fall, where we have to believe whose perspective we're being told. This happened because the kids, who would often probe the trash cans of the convenience store, vandalized a section of the store after the manager doused the trash with bleach so that they could not glean from it. But the trash can shenanigans do not end there. Varda presents an activist who's been eating from other people's garbage for over a decade. He has a job, though, a home, steady salary, and he has some very, very shiny rubber boots, but he still does not. He does it out of ethical concerns. At the very end of the sequence, she shows an exhibition that teaches children how to organize the trash and how to glean properly. It's a very interesting sequence. We're going into just the city culture Okay, the downtown
Yes.
culture. We're getting into sort of on the verge of homelessness within a city, but not. It's these group. First of all, I really like this sequence she goes over with the young people, and
Hmm.
this she's kind of pulling a Kiristami by going to this court hearing that's happening in real time of these group of vandals, as the store manager calls them, who vandalize his store because, they he wouldn't let them glean. What do you guys think of that?
I
Yeah, it's
love
fucked up.
the. It is fucked up, but I love like the different perspectives. I was like Agnes Varda goes to the store manager and he's like, yeah, they always trash the place. Like I just want it's fine if they glean, but like them like vandalizing and like throwing the garbage can, whatever. And then she's like, then I went to to the youngsters and they would respond how you think they would respond. They're like, no, that he just started doing that, so that's why we vandalized it. It's like a very I just love the
Yeah.
different perspectives of it, and I love Varda clearly chooses the sides of the youngsters.
But yeah, well, she shows them a lot. She shows them in like the streets of Paris, just hanging out with their dogs, all in a group. They're speaking of how they would take out the food from the trash so that they could eat, and now the food is filled with bleach, so they couldn't eat it, and so they vandalize the place. Yeah, it's a very complicated issue.
We also get to see the magistrate's perspective.
I know. And Varda's like, oh, that's a cute robe.
Yeah.
And oh yeah, she talks about how the young kids, they're like rebels, and one of them just left halfway through the court hearing.
What was the ruling the magistrate said again?
She says that they were doing vandalism,
Yeah,
regardless of the whole story. She was saying that they were still doing vandalism because of how they trashed the place. And well, we also meet this guy. He's a very eccentric guy with his boots, which he cleaned, and he says it's been 10 or 15 years.
it's crazy.
It's such a commitment, especially he's doing it since he's doing it from like ethical concerns. It's a very notable personality, and yeah, like there's exhibitions of the trash can, and which leads Varney to saying like, have these kids ever seen an actual broom sweeping actual trash? Because they organize this like very cute fake trash into these very cute fake trash cans, and then the organizer does actually do a lot of recycling. Like he has his own lamp made with like a plastic bottle and stuff like that. I think it's kind of important to remember that this film came at a time where recycling and these ethical concerns weren't, or at least ethical concerns in their relation to garbage were popular, but they weren't exactly in the mainstream conscience. Definitely not in the same way that they are today. The movie, while not the only one to treat the subject, was still way ahead of its time, especially in the ways in which it humanizes the people that are depicted here.
But even today, I would say like recycling is still a big issue. Like,
Yes, it is.
how many percentage of the people actually commit to it?
Oh yeah, I don't think so. I just think it's more of a popular thing in the
Yeah,
like people know what recycling is more than they did back then.
yeah, of course. The fake trash was very cute though.
It is. No, it's a good idea, especially for teaching
In
kids.
theory, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, the fake flowers with like made out of like the yogurt
Oh yeah, made out of
things.
Danoninos. I don't know. Do they have that in the U.S. or anything like that called Danoninos?
No, but in Colombia we have something very similar. I forgot what it was called,
Interesting.
but I know. Yeah, I don't know.
It's like
I don't think I've seen something like in the. But it's like the yeah. Do you do you freeze them sometimes to make popsicles?
yes, yes you do. But
Yes. Yeah. There you go.
hell yeah, it's like this strawberry yogurt for kids. That's not very. It's like artificial strawberry. I think
Yeah,
I haven't had one in years. But yeah,
we have of mora.
and we see the urban, we see the rural, and like as the film starts winding down, Varda showcases these two like this spectrum of gleaning in a different way than she did earlier on when she compares the truck driver with the chef. She's showcasing all these different ways in which they are opposites to one another, or at least this is my take on this following scene. But it's she has Salomon from the city and she has Robert in the fields. And Salomon works. He works in the urban world. He picks up fridges and other home appliances that people left in the street, and he restores them with one of his friends. He looks for food, like from bread to cold meats, even chicken, and he finds such large quantities that he shares them with several people. And yet he says that it's safe, like even the chicken is safe. In the earlier scene, the guy with the boots, he says that he's never gotten sick in those 15 years from eating from the trash. And then on the other hand, we have Robert, who is like a more traditional gleaner. He exists in the rural space. He forages for apples, kins, and other crops, and he also knows his way around greenhouses. And whenever we see him collecting, he's alone. He's not with his friends. He's not doing this for community. He's doing it for himself. To me, these scenes, some people will disagree. Some people will disagree to the fact that I bundle them up together here, but to me, this is like saying all these different ways in which gleaning is a thing. It's a bit of a reflection on how long we've come since the start of the documentary, but it's also just all these juxtapositions that come back to back, and I find them very interesting. I think this is also the scene where there's a guy who Varda says he overregulates what people glean, um, because he has all these systems, but they're the only systems in which he feels comfortable with letting people into gleaning.
He is over-regulating, but he's also letting people glean during the harvest season. He says as long as they're like, what is it, 30 yards
Yeah,
past the harvesters, they can collect any of the apples that are left over, which I think is actually really cool.
yeah. And he says that they can take as much as they want. They could literally take an entire harvest if they could
Yeah.
Yeah.
carry it.
They could take a secondary harvest of apples if they wanted to, if they worked as a collective to do it, and he'd be fine with it. They just needed to be carded and made sure they kept their distance from the harvesters, which is honestly pretty reasonable. And I understand why he'd want to card them just in case they would be up to some shenanigans or steal from the actual harvest.
This is probably the best sort of
Compromise.
compromise. Yes, this is probably the best compromise we see in the film. And it looks like it's a great system. I don't know how well it would work at a mass scale or a bigger scale, but it seems to work for these people.
I find it interesting because I feel like Agnes definitely thought it was over regulation. What did you guys think about that?
What does she? I mean, if the people need to bring their IDs or like their driver's license or anything like that, maybe it is because you're not letting those who would
That
need it the most, the people who don't
yeah,
have it,
yeah.
and
'Cause
make
there's a lot of people who don't even have IDs and just like definitely the very marginalized people in the society aren't able to
Yeah,
probably do
I,
that.
s- I see it. I see that as a problem, but also I can't help but still agree with the harvester for wanting to card the people just in case anything bad were to happen.
At least the rules are defined because I feel
that's true.
like going back to the oysters or even like some of the earlier moments, like it's just like very confusing, and like a lot of the law is just very confusing around it, like being around from the 1500s and all. So this is like at least one of like the ones that like it's pretty straightforward. Just bring your card, stay, what was it, 30 feet
I mean, it's probably
for the
30 meters
harvesters.
or something like that
Yeah,
away back from the harvest.
keep your distance from the actual harvest, and you can literally pick up as much as you want.
Yeah. One of the women there says that gleaners are picky with their choices. They can also be selective, and because there is so much food. Like there's little mountains of potatoes in the earlier scenes. There's so many grapes. There's so many apples, and there is still so much fresh food and high quality food.
Yeah, I forgot where it is in the movie, but the mother who is like my son only likes the
Oh yeah,
potatoes one specific way.
yeah. Like my son only likes this type of apple.
Oh yeah, apples. Yep.
Yeah, and do you guys have anything to say about Salomon and his crew? like I think this makes me think of all the way back to the French Revolution. If these types of rules existed, I mean, they probably existed to some sort of level, and that, I mean, it probably contributed to like the countrywide famine. But so much bread is just thrown away, where before you could have been just like so many people were starving, and so many people are starving still, but like they have no means to get to this high quality food.
Let them eat cake.
That sounds like a souffle line.
Wait.
It backfired.
Fuck.
Then it turns nighttime, and the end of the documentary draws nearer and nearer. Varda looks at TVs being destroyed for their copper. I think this is when she raps. I think this is when she starts rapping about the trash, because she raps 3 times. I think this is the last one. Well, no, there's 3 raps. The first one's not her. The second one I don't remember, and the third one is her. And this is when she raps herself. And of course, seeing all the TVs getting destroyed for the copper makes her reflect of the beginning of her journey. She shows more of the stuff she's been gathering, like some wooden chairs she found, and a clock with no hands to tell the time.
That's often considered the poster of the film. Is that
Yeah,
clock with no hands, followed by the two cat statues that are opposing it, and of course her kind of distorted figure that's standing behind it.
probably even the thumbnail of this video. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think this is so. I mean, it's so iconic, the club with no hands, but it makes me feel so emotional and sentimental because Vara was 72 when she made this film. It was still 20 years before her tragic death in 2019. But in an earlier scene, she says, "My hair and hands tell me that the end is near," which establishes earlier on this theme of the passing of time. And of course, a clock with no hands to tell the time is like a story in and of itself, with a moral to it. It's like time has stopped. There's no other place where you should be other than where you are right now. The deadlines aren't approaching. There's no day of the week or month or year. You're no years old, and you're free to do anything you want. And like that's life. It's the burden of time is a matter we put upon ourselves, but you don't have to live by those rules necessarily. You can just leave and go outside and exercise your own freedom. There are challenges to accepting that, especially internal challenges. But if you decide to conform less and less to those rules set by those, like, yeah, the people around you, there is still this sense of great liberation waiting for you, and like this sort of relief from the burden of time. And I think the part is that it's like saying, okay, fuck time. I don't care. I'm just gonna be. I'm just gonna spend my time having fun.
yeah, that's a very beautiful sentiment to have accompany it. I agree.
Yeah.
And I guess it also showcases that in a more literal stance rather than symbolically, that people can glean things that aren't even working, aren't even operating, that don't really that have lost its meaning to it, and can still find some sort of importance to it. Like her quote when she says, "He looked at an empty clock but put it back down. I picked it up and took it home. A clock without hands works fine for me. You don't see time passing."
It's so beautiful.
That is
Yeah,
beautiful.
it's really
It's
beautiful. It's like a little poem right there.
it's a beautiful memento. Yeah. Furthermore, she also raps. She raps
Yeah.
about trash and TVs. It's
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 kind of a
really cute.
banger.
Yeah.
She'd be dropping rhymes.
Oh yeah, easily.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And
Ugh.
then
I'm gonna start doing that too. Ugh.
and in the last stretch, to end the documentary, Varda decides to focus on the 2 high points of her experience. The first one is meeting a man who looks for food at abandoned markets. He's earned a master's degree, but works selling pamphlets outside of train stations during the day. And at night, he teaches the illiterate members of his community, most of whom are immigrants, how to read and write.
That was a crazy scene to have happen towards the end, because At the beginning, it's as if we're moving on to another section of the city or another section of gleaning, like the markets. The people that as soon as they're done with the farmer's market, they throw away the rotted stuff on the ground and leave it there to, I guess, be picked up by the trash collectors. And then we see this man who's got a blue bag with him, scrounging around for lettuces and parsley, I believe is what he was collecting when she approaches him to talk
I
to
think
him.
so.
And kind of on a initial reaction to him, he doesn't really seem very approachable. He kind of seems very reserved and a little bitter, at least with his facial features. He just doesn't seem like a very friendly person. But as she gets to know him, and as we get to know him as an audience member, we're kind of being put into his shoes and his perspective, and we're learning more about him collecting food to survive. Really, he's just doing it because he likes it. He likes doing it. He's a vegetarian, so of course he's going to frequent the farmer's market for the produce. Hell of a lot cheaper to do it that way than purchasing it at a grocery store. Talks about his professional life, his master's degree that he has, and like you said, yeah, he sells his pamphlets as a career, as a job. But what was the big nail on the coffin is what he does as a, what is it? What could you say it as a
In his
Volunteer.
spare time,
in his
in his
spare
own spare
time
time.
to teach people how to read, immigrants in his apartment complex too. Um, that really shocked me. It surprised me, and it kind of opened my eyes to that idea that she's kind of exploring, where you shouldn't judge someone based off what they're doing, what that they're gleaning. That doesn't make them a bad person at all. And in
Yeah,
fact, there are really beautiful people out there that have kind souls and hearts that just happen to also be partaking in something that is often frowned upon in our
hmm,
society.
yes, and like you said, he seems unapproachable at first. And there's another guy who seems unapproachable by the river. And Varda's like, part of me really wanted to talk to him, but part of me really did not want to. And it's such a pleasure that she did talk to this man. It's like you said, it's so shocking, even from the first time, because she's saying like, "Oh, what are you picking up?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know. I'm picking." I think he's saying like he's picking lettuce, but it doesn't have. He starts talking about zinc and the nutritional value of those foods.
Yeah. It has
And
both
Varda,
vitamin D.
yes, and Varda says how she's astonished by seeing that, and how every day or every couple days she would go back to talk with him and learn a little bit more. Sometimes she would talk a lot. Sometimes she would talk very little. Yes, I think it all harkens back. It all harkens back to the very early moments, to the chef, to the scenes with the chef, where when you're gleaning, you can also find this really super high quality stuff. This stuff that can get you 2 Michelin stars. And I don't know, I just love that this scene is so close to the end, because this is the crown jewel of artist gleaning. This is the most amazing story she could find. It's incredible that she could find a mind like him, and even more so that she can show him to us through the film, or like through filmmaking. He's a representation of a type of success that's so elusive in a capitalist world, and he should supposedly have arrived and should have what it takes to succeed within the parameters of said capitalist society, because he has a master's degree, yet the system still failed him. But even then, he still managed to do something extremely worthwhile that improves his community and the entire world around him. Yeah, like Varda's second to last cleaning has so much value. She keeps finding so much value on what people are leaving behind.
He's definitely one of the more interesting characters, probably the most interesting, because
Yeah,
on a surface value, when I was seeing him, I was like, oh, this guy is just he does not look very friendly. But then by the end, I'm thinking, oh, this guy is just a better man than I ever will be, isn't he?
Yeah.
Just seeing how selfless he is with and I believe the immigrants he was teaching to read are from Senegal, so
I
it's
think
just
so.
really
Yeah.
cool. saying that he's one of the men that she revisits in The Gleaners and I 2 years later, and
Oh,
in the instance that she does meet him again is when he's prepping for a marathon to run, as if he couldn't be more impressive of a person.
Oh my
he,
god.
he like she records his marathon that he runs, and she comments that out of all the people that meet someone at the finish line or embrace them, or they cross the finish line exhausted and panting, sweating, and guzzling water as soon as they're done. He just crosses it and just looks the exact same as he did when he started, and isn't even panting or breathing heavily or anything. And that he ran something like 27 miles in a span of 3.5 hours.
Jesus.
Yeah, that's crazy.
No panting. That's impressive.
Yeah, and he's wearing like, I think he's wearing some short shorts, but he's wearing long sleeve too. Like long sleeve, those pits are Sahara deserts down there. It's like a jungle of sweat. Very impressive guy that we're learning about towards the end of the film. And I'm glad that she got to revisit him and talk to him and also hear about how he felt about the documentary, which he saw and loved. So
oh, I love to learn that. I didn't know that. I didn't know he had seen it. I mean, it makes sense, but that's I'm gonna watch The Gleaners and I 2 years later. That you've made me really interested in watching it.
Same here.
yeah, that's
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 so
just a
cool.
few moments that happen in it because a lot of it she also talks to people that sent fan mail to her about their
Mm.
experiences with gleaning, and then she visits them and sees their lives that they live, and it's just really cool. It's basically a second part to it, a continuation to the whole idea of gleaning. It's really beautiful. It's just as good as that documentary for sure.
Wow. The film now finally getting to the actual final scene of the movie. It ends with the other of Varda's high points. She goes to a museum to unveil a painting by Redouan called Gleaners Fleeing Before the Storm. The museum workers take it outside where it is exposed to sunlight and the wind. And then the movie goes to credits.
I was wondering what the lead up to this scene would be because she's in a warehouse that doesn't at all look like an art gallery of any sorts or anything. And these people are, these two women that are helping her are shuffling through these giant, giant paintings. We only see the back of them. And, they're as tall as 6, 7 feet tall. They're very impressive in size. And they're shuffling through them, moving them over, and we're trying to understand what is it she's trying to get revealed. And what is revealed is that beautiful painting. I actually find it to be a lot more impressive than the classic Gleaner painting that was at the beginning of the film. Being caught in the storm, it's just really a really dynamic action set piece, really. Something I wanted to bring up that's showcased in The Gleaners and I too is the film kind of begins within the first 10 minutes of the premiere of the painting's restoration at an art gallery. So that painting gets restored through because of her film and how popular it got, and a lot of people sent mail over to that museum asking for that painting to be showcased, and the staff agreed. It got restored, and Varda was asked to attend the premiere of it being unveiled at the museum, and it looked beautiful, fully restored. It just kind of felt like a nice bow to finish that whole sequence of her retrospect.
Yeah, I just love the image of the painting with the gleaners fleeing the storm outside when there is a storm coming. Like it works in so many levels. Like as a meta commentary, it's blurring the lines between art and fiction and reality, between the commentator and the thing that is being commentated on, which is what Varda does the entire documentary. But it's also this like ominous threat or like omen of like what's coming for the lifestyle of the gleaners. And same with the Gleaners in the painting. Like, you don't know what's gonna happen to the Gleaners in the painting. You don't know if they'll go to their homes and get their wheat and all their things, or maybe they don't have homes and they just go elsewhere. You don't know where that's gonna happen with the Gleaners. Same with how you don't know what's gonna happen with the with the people depicted in the movie.
Yeah, it's also like about like mortality in a way, like because, like you said, Agnes Varda, she's like, I feel like the end is near and like about the passage of time.
Yeah, yeah. This movie is so special. It's You can see how so many people have connected with it through the years. A lot of people really like. I just keep thinking of the moment where the camera case starts dancing. It has so much personality. Like, it showcases Varda's personality, but also her filmmaking's personality, and it's just so fun. You're in here. You're like in the quote unquote trenches, learning about these things, but you're also having fun with it because it's like that's kind of what life is about, you know.
Yeah,
And like, we barely even mentioned it, but I really like how the film portrays France. It's trying to capture a very realistically grim and mudded portrayal of late 90s France. A very which I mean, through cinematography, she's making callbacks to France in the 19th century and 17th century and 18th century. But she's also exposing, not really looking for it because it's so abundant and it's plain to see, like those mountains of potatoes, but she's exposing the beauty that comes with it all, with the potato gleaning and the people and the art making and the guy who has the master's degree and the chef and the psychoanalyst and all these things. How, like, she can find so many little diamonds in this massive movie and put them all in a movie that's only an hour and 28 minutes.
it's a great bite of life.
Through the watches, I think it's become one of my favorite documentaries.
I adored it. Like I said, I didn't know what I was expecting. I actually didn't know nothing about this movie when I got into it, but like it was just like it was for such like a fringe topic to me. Like I related so much to it, and I related to a lot of the people in it, and I saw a lot of the people that I've met throughout my life. It because like it's just such a, like I said, it's such a great bite of life movie, and like I feel like I connected with Varda a lot. Like just such a comely spirit.
Yeah, I really love everything I've seen from Varda so far. This this wasn't my first documentary from her that I've seen, but like I said earlier in the discussion, every time I see something new from her, it feels like I'm stepping into a different part of her brain, a different part of her outlook on life, and I'm seeing a new perspective of art and of her love and care of the world. Um, the Gleaners and I went from not knowing what that meant at all, from gleaning, to now I'm trying to attribute it to my own life. I know that there's a dump that's near my area where people drop things that they don't need, of course. Obviously, it's a dump, but I mean, things that aren't fully destroyed or decrepit, they'll throw to a certain portion of it. And I've actually been there before and taken like flower pots from there that are beautiful and beautiful ceramic flower pots that some person thought was trash, but of course to me I treasured it and planted some basil in it and have used it for my food and cooking, of course. So just seeing something like this, I feel like gleaning is a process that we as human beings have done for millennia and will continue to do so in history. And I love that Varda was able to capture this almost like she's making it as a love letter, really, to human survival. And I really loved it. Really loved the documentary. I'll definitely be rewatching it too, through the years to come. I definitely want to pick up that Varda box set. This is just yet another reason why I should pick it up, because every single thing I've seen from her, I really enjoy. So, yeah, I'm glad we were able to discuss it. Thank you, Eugene, for recommending it to us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I can't wait till we discuss more Varda, because from what I remember, at the very least, Cleo from 5 to 7 is 14 here, and Vagabond is 101st, and there might be another Varda. I don't remember.
Le Bonheur is also in there.
Claveneur, yes. So, do you guys want to move on to the whatever we're discussing next week?
Oh boy,
Within like 2 weeks?
we got some Rex. Anybody got some Rex?
I got one.
I
I
got mine too.
figure Eugene's the Le Champion. I just said the champion. Fuck me. What's your rec? You do it first.
Well, I think it's a movie that, oh, I didn't even realize why it had come back to my mind, and it's gotten some hype because I think the Criterion is being announced soon. There's something like that, or it's coming back in Criterion. But it's a movie that I've been meaning to watch for a long time, and it's G.W. Pabst's Pandora's Box. I
Oh
know a
my
couple
god.
things. I know a couple things about it, about what happened around the production of it, and I know the general things going on with Louise Brooks and her character, and I can't wait to watch it.
I've been meaning to watch that for so long, and it's always looked so interesting to me.
I know I can't wait.
Pandora's box. Okay.
Andor? What?
Don't make me wreck Star Wars. I'll do it.
Not
Don't
yet.
make
Not
me.
yet.
No.
You see, it's Eugene that hates the mainstream movies, not me.
Yeah.
It's
I
not
know.
me. It's
I've gotten a
you.
bad rap. I've gotten a bad rap.
Well, speaking of rap, Souffle, do you have a rec?
I do. I forgot the exact placement of it, but my rec is Hiroshima Mon Amour. It's a movie
Hell yeah.
I really want to revisit because I feel like there'd be so much to talk about, and I feel like it would be an amazing experience for all three of us to watch it.
Based picks all around from the both of you. I am going to
Please pick
rec.
The Matrix.
No, not yet. It's actually between this and Alien, because I just recently rewatched Alien, and that's a fucking certified hood classic. But I am actually gonna wreck something else. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna wreck Crash by Cronenberg.
Oh my god, I love that movie.
All right.
That's exciting. Cannot
This is
wait
so
to
exciting.
see what we discuss.
Yep, I've got the wheel of fortune pulled up right here. You can all see it, guys. You see the
Oh yeah, I love the collab.
names. Yeah,
I
the
love
colors are great. I
I
love
love the
that.
green.
All right, I'm going to spin the wheel in 3, 2, 1. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh
It's
boy,
going
oh
so
boy.
fast. I can't even.
It's going so fast, and Souffle, you've won for Hiroshima Mon Amour.
Wow.
We're going to be discussing that next.
I love
Beautiful.
Alain René. That's so exciting.
I think it's still the only Rene film I've seen.
Oh, you should watch Last Year at Marienbad. It's amazing.
That's
One
a
of my
good
favorite
movie.
movies.
I bet
Jean
I'll love it.
Dillman's in it.
That one's so controversial, isn't it?
It is. Is it in the
Yeah.
list? I think we'll talk about it at some point, but it's one of the best movies ever made, in my opinion.
Is Night and Fog in this list? I've seen Night and Fog, but
There's a couple short films. There's The House is Black.
La Jetée.
There's
La Jetée.
La Jetée. There's the Maya Deren one. Meshes of the Afternoon. And then there's another one. The other one might be Night and Fog. Let me just make sure. The other one, no, the other one is on Chandalou by Buñuel.
Ah.
Congratulations, Souffle, for winning for Hiroshima Mon Amour. I love that film. I own the Criterion. I'm definitely going to rewatch it in prep. I'll watch it multiple times because I think that movie is absolutely beautiful. Spoiler alert. Eugene, have you seen Hiroshima Mon Amour?
I have, yes.
Okay,
Have
so
we?
we've all
Oh,
seen it. That's good to know.
Okay.
Wow.
Yep.
We're all
But it's been
prepped.
so many years, so I'm excited to rewatch it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in years either. So,
Been a few for me too. Yeah.
so
Maybe next
week-
time, Cronenberg. Maybe next time.
Where is Hiroshima Mon Amour available to stream?
Is it in the channel?
It's on the channel and it's on HBO Max, and I think I saw a upload of it on YouTube, 1080p.
So I guess that's it for this week.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you everybody for listening in, and tune in for the next episode.
Yeah. Thank you, Jason Isaacs, for joining in and listening to us. And
Goodbye,
Yvonne.
everyone.
Goodbye, Yvonne.